Okay, so good morning to those of you who are tuning in from Asia, and I guess good evening to those in Canada or North America. My name is 𝗂𝐷, Executive Director with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. Welcome to our Manufacturing in Vietnam 101 webinar. This is the first one we've done focused solely on the topic. And I think it's based on the growing interest we're seeing in the sector. Which is quite exciting. So before we begin, I'd like to thank our national corporate sponsors, CN, Manulife, Sun Life, Vina Capital, and KPMG for supporting the Chamber year-round, as well as the many co-hosts and organizations who've helped us promote this webinar, leading to well over 100 registrations, including the Canada ASEAN Business Council, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Hong Kong, and Canadian Chamber of Commerce Thailand, the Council of Taiwanese Chambers in Vietnam, the Singapore Chamber of Commerce Vietnam, the Malaysia Business Council Vietnam, Indian Chamber of Commerce Vietnam, Portugal Chamber of Commerce Vietnam, the 𝗵𝗲𝐶hAM, and any other groups or individuals who've helped share the topic. I think we have Dan joining us here. I just want to make sure. I'd also like to thank Long Hao Corporation for sponsoring today's webinar. We couldn't do it without that support. So it's great to see people joining in here from Toronto to Vancouver, Hong Kong to Ho Chi Minh City, and many, many other places. Vietnam has become a leading destination for global manufacturing, and with Vietnam's GDP growth continuing to grow at one of the strongest rates in the world, looking at 8% for 2022, the manufacturing sector continues to account for more than half of all FDI, which is a major driver of the sustained growth. So today we'll hear from three dynamic speakers with the goal of diving into some key information on industrial zones and manufacturing clusters in the north, center, and south of the country, incentives that exist, logistical advantages, trends and opportunities, key manufacturing sectors ranging from textiles to electronics to food processing, heavy equipment, and everything in between, considerations when sourcing product in Vietnam and navigating the market in general, as well as lived experiences for Canadian companies who are already doing business here. So following the presentations, we'll open the floor up to a Q&A. So at any time, just please feel free to submit your question or comment in the Q&A or chat button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to that following the conclusion of the presentations. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. 𝗂𝐷 𝗂𝐷, who has worked in Southeast Asia for more than 10 years in the field of logistics, sourcing, and supply chain. In 2017, he started his journey with Source of Asia as the sourcing director and operations director, and has been managing over 20 experts in this field in his team for the past years. So Zachary is responsible for optimizing business development, partnerships, and networking with international customers, with his dual role as sourcing director, enabling him to cover all activities of supplier network expansion, market evaluation analysis, and customer production management. So Zachary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Zach. Good morning and good evening to everybody. I'm very happy to be here. So thank you again for the 𝐾𝐚𝐧 to giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our knowledge. So I will not reintroduce myself, as Zach did it quite well. Thank you for that. And I will start without further notice my presentation. So give me 1 second to share the slide. So I would like to start with giving a little bit of context to what we call the China+1 strategy. And then I will go a bit further into why Vietnam is emerging as the new manufacturing hub. I would say a few advices and what we noticed during our missions with our customers on some challenges to overcome and how to overcome them at least. And I will share 2 case studies just to illustrate a little bit before going further into manufacturing with Long Hao and then Danone Food. So what we call China+1 strategy, and really what we have witnessed here in Southeast Asia, really started off in 2017 when the US and China trade war was initiated. And we saw at that time a big flow of purchaser, buyer, or industrial from the US are looking for solutions to avoid those tariffs implemented by the Trump administration. Since then, there was an acceleration, of course, with the Chinese production costs increasing, both on the manufacturing labor, but also as well on the infrastructure themselves. So China became less and less competitive. But also with the COVID crisis, China started to be really isolated, and it was beginning to be difficult to see how it was going to go for the next few years. Therefore, anticipating the supply chain and being able to actually assess what is going to happen was difficult. So purchasers and industrial started to look at alternatives. One of the things that we saw at that time was also the increase on the transportation and on the logistic, with prices rising and multiplying by sometimes 5, 10, 5, 8 times the normal price of the sea freight. So the first reaction was really to go into relocation closer to the countries that we speak. So, for example, we saw a lot of North American companies looking at Mexico and South America as a new manufacturing area. In Europe, we saw a big move to Eastern Europe, North Africa, and Turkey, and that was the main target at that time. And then, especially in Europe, which is a bit less the case for North America, but the war between Russia and Ukraine showed that even that solution and looking at a new destination closer, but sometimes was risky as well. And what we witness is, in fact, what we call the China +1 strategy is simply a matter of looking at managing the risk of having a one-channel supply chain. So nowadays, it would be a bit reductive to summarize like this, but what we were discussing with our customer prior to 2017 was usually the export price. We were comparing export prices from one factory to another, because all the other parameters were less significant. Nowadays, when you look at either setting up your factory or simply purchasing from someone, you have to take into consideration all those parameters, which are the export price factory, the transport and the logistic, the free trade agreement, or the other way around, the taxes and the tariff that you will receive. How to manage all of those locations. If you start to have a risk management supply chain with different area of manufacturing, then how to make them work together, and of course how to project yourself with the control and the supervision of your partners and your suppliers, the stability of the price. When we talk about price stability, we don't only take into account the price of the product or the factory itself, but also the currency exchange, for instance, which has been quite volatile for the past few months. And of course, that flexibility of production capacities, taking into account geopolitical risk, the cultural and traditional holidays, off work, and so on. So all of those parameters are a bit more complex to combine. That being said, of course, there are some solutions, and what we have been doing for the past 5 years is to always try to assess what is the customer, so the industrial partner criteria, where do they export, what is their market, but also what is their vision for the next 5 to 10 years, and trying to assess where is the best location to either relocate or to add a manufacturing location. Basically, this relocation we saw went in different direction. One thing to consider is that 1/3 of the relocation out of China is going to Southeast Asia nowadays. Of course, there are some other movement, as you can see on the map: Mexico, Eastern Europe. India is also emerging as a big manufacturing location. And the result of this is also the change of the manufacturing landscape in those countries, including Vietnam, where, for instance, the automobile sector, the electronical sector are really starting to rise as a major industry in Vietnam, when 5-10 years ago it was not such the case, and it was not the first location you would think of. This has, of course, direct impact on the type of workers, the type of infrastructures that the country needs to assess, but also it has an impact on the supporting industries that follow. those big names moving, Foxconn with strong manufacturing for Apple, Samsung, even Lego nowadays. They also need the support of supporting industries, and that create opportunities for other other industrial partners to actually move there and get closer to these big actors. I will take a case study at the end of my part to explain a little bit further on this. So why Vietnam? I was mentioning that ASEAN is dragging a lot of interest and a lot of movement out of China to Vietnam, to ASEAN, sorry. Why Vietnam is actually emerging as the biggest one. So there are, according to us, there are 6 factors. 3 of them are really about Vietnam itself, the population and the government, and 3 of them are more strategic and trade related. Vietnam out of ASEAN, so ASEAN is about 680 million people. Vietnam is already 100 million, almost 100 million inhabitants, with a very young population and still growing. That creates, of course, a good, interesting consumer market, because there is also the rise of a middle class, but also a good and potential manufacturing labor force, which is starting to grow. One thing I want to mention about the middle class, why is it important? When I first came to Vietnam in 2000, 2005, it was actually difficult to find middle or top managers, especially for the manufacturing, with some experience and expertise on technology or quite effective manufacturing. Now it's less the case. You have a lot more educated with factory degrees managers, which creates more opportunity to actually set up a more complex industry. That's one of the interesting factor. The other one, Zach mentioned that Vietnam is driving with a potentially 8% growth in 2022. Actually, what is quite interesting is that the average growth per year for the past 21 years has been about 6.5%, which shows that the country in its, the government and the country in its choices is quite dynamic and supporting that growth, especially by reinvesting almost 6% of these GDP into infrastructures. I will come down to that. I was mentioning the manufacturing labor force. 2 factors. The first one, as you know, China has a decreasing population, but more importantly, a population that is getting older and older, which creates a really stressful position for the manufacturers, because it gets more and more difficult to get qualified workers or interested workers, or simply to get workers. The other factor is, of course, the salary. If we take an average number, again, it is an average number. You have to consider that depending on the industry, depending on the location, as you saw, Vietnam is a very long country, to more than 2,000 kilometers from north to south. But in average, salary of a worker is about 1/3 of the one you would find in China. When I say take it into consideration, when we look at workers working for in the field in agriculture, or workers working in the field of electronic or automobile, of course, the salaries are a little bit different, but it still shows that the potential of having a lower heavy labor force is potential in Vietnam. The last parameter I wanted to point is that Vietnam has not yet reached its manufacturing labor force point, meaning that there are still workers available. It is not easy to recruit workers, but it is not a conflict, and it is not impossible, basically, to find the labor force. The second aspect, which is, according to us, quite important, is the dynamic and the will of the government to become a big major actor in the international world trade. Basically, they have decided a long time ago, and they still do, to sign and to get in touch with all the major countries in the world to sign free trade agreements. That gives them a very important position within ASEAN. Vietnam is, of course, part of the ASEAN free trade agreement between the 10 countries, but as well has managed to sign very major free trade agreements, such as the one with Europe. So basically, there is a free trade agreement between Vietnam alone and Europe markets. Same with the UK. The ones that are interesting to you are two of them as well. The first one is, of course, with Canada, the CPTPP, as well as the RCEP. RCEP is an international trade agreement between ASEAN countries plus South Korea, Japan, China, and Australia. Why is it interesting? It's because it represents the biggest trade zone in the world, and it represents the first GDP, the biggest GDP aspect of the world. So by relocating or having a manufacturing site in Vietnam, you can actually not only touch your own zone if you are working in Canada, but also you can expand to Southeast Asia and Asian markets with more competitivity. I was mentioning earlier the reinvestment of the GDP into infrastructures. It is true that 20 years ago, and I have some customers that actually remind me that 20 years ago, you came to Vietnam, it was very difficult to travel from north to south. It was even within the city. First time I came was only a bicycle and motorbike, and there was no car, no truck, no bus, and so on. The country has changed drastically, and it is really supported. It is a will by the government. So, of course, on its major infrastructures such as seaports and airports, which are building, we are in Ho Chi Minh City now, and they are building a second international airport to support that flow of coming and external travelers. But also more into its core infrastructure, such as industrial zone. Today, the government is supporting some big projects in water treatment, in energy sector, to actually sustain that growth in the manufacturing sector. What you need to know in ASEAN, of course, not everything is easy. So when I say not everything is easy, first, ASEAN countries themselves, the 10 countries of ASEAN, even though they are part of the same free trade agreement, they are very different in their aspect, in their culture, in their tradition, in their way of working, in their infrastructure. Recently, a study showed that the two more dynamic countries in ASEAN were Vietnam and Indonesia in terms of manufacturing. If you look at Vietnam and if you look at Indonesia, the infrastructure and the geopolitical context is very different. So that's the first aspect to check. The second one is, of course, the human resources. As I mentioned, setting up in Vietnam, you need to consider that you will not find the same profile, the same experience, depending on your industry, of course, the same type of workers. Therefore, that adaptation is not easy to do. Administration and corruption. So don't get me wrong, when we talk about corruption, I'm not talking about the daily corruption, but in general, for major projects, you have to go through a very complex administration and sometimes dealing with corruption. That's something that you need to be aware of, meaning that you will not face it all the time, but there is also some, not direct information that you would get. So you need the support of local people to understand how it flows within the administration. One parameter that is very important to consider when you move to Vietnam, Vietnam compared to China, again, is lacking a lot of raw material. There are not as many raw material available and manufactured within Vietnam as in China. So when we talk about industrial setup, of course, there is the aspect of having your own factory and the workers and the setup, but also how you will organize your supply chain. And that's something to really consider, because it's not going to be the same one-on-one as a factory that you are currently running, basically because the flows are quite different. To assess all of this, we talk about the 5P that I will present, but basically, the first thing is preparation. Moving into Vietnam, we see some customers, they start to decide to rent a land, build a factory, and go very fast on their own without having a proper study. The result of this is usually failure. Why? Because they forgot to assess certain parameters. And we have a recent case where a company working in biodiversity applied their business plan to the local authorities and were simply rejected because there was a new regulation in that area about biodiversity with some specific water treatment. They did not have the knowledge of this, and because they got refused, they were not able to reapply at the same location even with a new business plan. So they had to start all over again their research on a new industrial park in another zone of Vietnam. That is a shame because it was simply a matter of adjusting a bit their business plan and especially specifying how they would treat the reject from the production, and they would have been actually accepted by the local authorities. Why is it a shame? Is because that industrial zone was really the best one according to us after we got involved. According to us, it was the best choice, but simply not enough preparation in advance led to a failure at the end. While we talk about perseverance, as I mentioned, things are not easy, but the potential is there. So sometimes there will be some bottlenecks along the way, and we saw some customers dropping the project simply because they felt they were not getting anywhere. One of the most important things when you actually start to implement yourself in Vietnam is the first one, to have a presence, to have some people here. So it can be your own people, it can be a service company like ours, the support of 𝗏, for instance, who have the knowledge to do so, but basically to be able to be aware of every steps, and whenever there is a bottleneck, to be able to assess it and find a solution. Prudence and professionalism, that makes most sense to all of you, but it's something that we like to remind our customers simply because sometimes they have the feeling it doesn't apply here. I urge you to think it applies here. The Vietnamese population in general is a very advised and educated consumerism population. They look at a lot of details, they pay attention to details, and it is something that you should not overlook when wanting to come to Vietnam. Two cases I would like to show just to illustrate a bit what I mentioned. The first one, I want to start with 𝗏 Industries. 𝗏 Industries is a bar-turning company based in France and working all around the globe with automobile sector, luxury sector, e-mobility sector, and electronic sector. They are a supporting industry. When they came to Vietnam, the main reason they decided to move to Vietnam is because they had one of their biggest customers asking them to get closer to them for better reactivity. And this customer is an automobile sector, is based in China. 𝗏 Industries decided to not set up in China because they did not want to depend only on one of their customers. And they actually chose Vietnam in order to access other markets in ASEAN countries which are growing. So they will actually set up their factory in Vietnam in order to answer to their biggest customer, as well using it as a platform to start prospecting and finding new customers in the ASEAN countries. Ovinal, on the other hand, is a little bit different, but same to show why the supply chain is a bit complex. It is not a relocation. It's in agro-food doing fertilizer. They have a very strong know on the gene changing and making the fertilizer efficient. But the rest of it is basically waste from the farms. So instead of, and sorry, something I forgot to mention, Vietnam is a huge consumer country for fertilizer with their agriculture business. Before, they were able to ship directly from France to Vietnam, the finished product packed in the containers and so on. With time, they lost some market shares due to competitivity. Some local actors started to sell a similar product, but also because with the transportation cost, it started to be not as competitive as before. They decided to relocate a part of their manufacturing in Vietnam, and therefore they are now shipping not the full product, but only the added value component, which is much smaller to transport. And then they actually set up a supply chain working with local actors to get the waste out of the local actors, the local farmers, locally in Vietnam, make the assembly in Vietnam, and then being able to sell in Vietnam and ASEAN as a hub. That lets them to be 35% more competitive on price, remaining with the same level of quality and being much more compliant with carbon tax and environmental expectation. That's it for my side. We have a team in Vietnam of 52 people working, as Zach mentioned, in supporting industries into their sourcing, supply chain, industrial setup, market expansion. Feel free to contact us if you have further questions. And of course, I remain until the end of the webinar to answer some of yours in the forum.
So thank you, Zachary. Very good overview. And as mentioned, please, for everybody watching, if you have any questions, just feel free to send those in through the Q&A button. We'll try to get to everything or all of the questions at the end. So I think moving on there into a good segue, we'll introduce our next speaker and sponsor of today's event, Mr. 𝗂𝗟, who is the Corporate Development Director for the Logistical Corporation, a developer with a large-scale industrial park in the south of Ho Chi Minh City, as well as in the Da Nang high-tech park area. Mr. 𝗓 has been promoting FDI at Logistical for over 6 years, getting his start in the manufacturing world by interpreting Japanese, English, and Vietnamese for manufacturers coming into Vietnam. He continues to foster amicable relations between Vietnam and numerous national and international entities through the world, including private enterprises and government agencies from Japan, Singapore, the USA, Europe, and others. So 𝗓, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jack. And thank you, Zachary, for a very good overview of investment for manufacturing in Vietnam. So in my part, I would like to share a little bit more about industrial zone, or we call industrial park. How many industrial park in Vietnam, and where is it, and how they run, and how they support manufacturer when they come to set up a manufacturing facility in Vietnam. So in my talk, I will have 3 sections. The first one is a general view about Vietnam, and then we look more into the some key economic region in Vietnam, and the third one is how an industrial park developer can support their tenant from the very first stage of researching until the time they operating. First, we look at the FDI inflow into Vietnam, and in the left side you can see the information of the first 6 months this year. So we have more than 14 billion USD flowing into Vietnam for the first 6 months, and we can have the data here. So inside that 14 billion, there are 3 kinds of the project. One is the totally new investment, totally new direct investment into Vietnam. It accounts for 752 projects, and there are a lot of projects. They increase their capital. There's almost 500 projects who already running the business in Vietnam, but they increase their capital in the last 6 months. So it means that the economic condition in Vietnam is growing, and they feel they have more room to develop, so they decide to expand. And a lot of projects they come into Vietnam by M&A. So 1,700 project. They start by a faster way by finding a suitable local company or a company inside Vietnam, and then they do the M&A to start the business in Vietnam. And in the right side, you can see that who invest in Vietnam right now. So the biggest number come from Singapore. For this one, among 4 billion USD, around 70% is not directly from Singapore. This is another foreign company who choose Singapore a financial hub to start business in Southeast Asia. So they set a headquarters in Singapore, and then they use that Singapore company to invest in Vietnam. So Singapore always be a big number because they are a financial hub. And the second one comes from South Korea. So they are the real biggest investor in Vietnam up to now, because the Vietnam and Korea have a very close relationship, and many big company in Korea come into Vietnam like Samsung, LG, 𝐂𝐨𝐧 or something. So that make a big investment in Vietnam. And the third one, you can see Denmark from Europe. This is the huge jump for European investment, because there's a big project from a Denmark company named 𝗲𝗂. They come to the South Vietnam with $1 billion USD investment. So that make Denmark become the third player. And next you can see the China. So if you come back last 5 years, the investment from China is not that big, but it's growing very fast recently. I think because of China regulation change. So even though Chinese company, they also try to invest outside of China. And the last one I would like to mention is Japan. Japan is like Korea. They have a very good manufacturing industry. A lot of company doing in the manufacturing side, and they also invest a lot in Vietnam. But the number of capital from Japan is not that big compared to Korea. Next, this is the location and industry that invest in Vietnam. So in the left side, we can see the name of the provinces that attract the foreign investment. So you can see the biggest number is flowing into Ho Chi Minh City. Ho Chi Minh City is the central of the South Economic Region. They have a biggest population and generate a biggest GDP in Vietnam. So a lot more and more projects come into Vietnam. So among these 10 locations, 10 provinces, you can see the balance between the south and the north. So 5 regions from the south and 5 regions from the north. It's you can from this you can estimate the balance between the north and the south of Vietnam. And in the right side, you can see the manufacturing still be the biggest industry that attract FDI coming to Vietnam. And the next is about real estate business, because more and more infrastructure project is investing in Vietnam, and Vietnam the population also growing. So this is chance for real estate company. And then the third one is more about the power project, like electric or wind power or something. So if we look at the more detail, here we can see the three biggest industry, the utility, like the power, infrastructure and power. And the second is the manufacturing, and the third is real estate. If we look at the blue one here for the utility, you can see wind power, the coal-fired power project, account for 17%, and the wind power is the 11%. But the LNG power project is the biggest, is more than 70%. So Vietnam really focused on setting up the stable for the energy. And the energy cost in Vietnam is low compared to other ASEAN countries. This is the policy from the government to encourage more and more manufacturing company to come into Vietnam. And you see that the utility is growing very fast from 2019 to up to 2021, because of the eco-friendly power project like wind power or solar power is promoted recently, and Vietnam have a very good condition to set up this the project. So more and more power project coming to Vietnam. And looking into the manufacturing side, you see the biggest number come from electronic industry. This is because of the big investment from some of the big brand like Samsung, LG, even Apple, Google and Microsoft is in the north of Vietnam. So the supplier coming also. And the next one is machinery and equipment. The third one is packaging, footwear and textile. Auto park also have a good number. And this is the general view of industrial park and economic zone information. For industrial park, Vietnam have 335 industrial park who already visit and confirm and provide almost 100,000 hectares, and current occupancy is around 50%. But for the industrial park which already put into operation, the occupancy is quite high. It's more than 75%. And for economic zone, there are 17 economic zones in Vietnam, and they setting up along the coastline in not so developed infrastructure there is not so well developed at the moment, so they want to encourage company to go there, so they setting up industrial zone with more favor tax incentive to encourage company to go there. And the number of projects coming into industrial park is more than almost 10,000 projects already, with the capital almost 200 billion USD so far. And this is the map of Vietnam. You can see there are 4 major economic regions. One in the north, central by Hanoi, and this is more focused on electronic and automobile, shipbuilding, and textile. The reason is there's some big project in the north, like Samsung, LG, and the second reason is there's a close connect with China. So inland transport from north to China is now improved a lot. So more easy for them to come into the north. And the third reason is there's a well development of infrastructure like highway or big port. Big project of a big port is setting up over there. And the second economic reason is the south. Like Ho Chi Minh City is the central, and over here is more. It's less electronic, but more commercial and commercial project in here. And the third one is in the central of Vietnam. We can see the Da Nang is the central, and over there they focus more on the infrastructure, high-tech manufacturing, renewable energy, and supporting energy, and tourism. And the last one is the Mekong Delta region in the bottom of Vietnam. So Mekong River is coming into here, and here it have a lot of material, agriculture material. So the developed industry focus on agriculture product processing, farming, fishing, and seafood processing. So A is the developer in Vietnam. So Long Hậu now we have 3 industrial parks in the south of Vietnam located in Long An province, which is close to Ho Chi Minh City. And over here we have more than 200 tenants here. So Long Hậu, we focus. We are industrial park that focus on small and medium-sized company. We are not setting up for a very huge project. So over here we set up some product that's suitable for a small and medium-sized company, like a small size ready-built factory, or a small size of the land with supporting service. And in the central, we come into the Da Nang high-tech park to set up the ready-built factory for a high-tech manufacturing company here. And coming to the next two years, we have a project in the Mekong Delta region to focus on the agriculture processing business. And here's some information about how we can support the SME company to set up a manufacturing facility here. So the very traditional one is industrial land. What's special in us is the two things. The first is we repair the small size land and the medium size land, so easy for SME to start the business by owning facility. And the second one is we own up the land here. We already do the lump sum payment to the government for the 50 years, so it guarantees the legal for our tenant to really own the property, and warranty there are no occur fee in terms of the land using fee. And the second one is the ready build factory. We are the pioneer in terms of the small size ready build factory. We have the factory with a size like 500 square meter. A lot of our tenants using, when they first come to Vietnam, they use 500 square meter, and then they keep expanding after 3 years or 5 years, and finally they come up with acquiring a land and building up their own factory. And besides, we have the multi-storage factory. This is designed for clean and light industry. Over here, we have many companies working on the testing industry, like a labo and high-tech industrial park in Da Nang, and we focus on supporting the high-tech company. And here's the information about who inside our industrial park in terms of the nationality and industry. So half of the companies is come from Vietnam, and half come from half is foreign company, and among Japan, Korea is the biggest, and other is US, Singapore, Europe, and Australia is other. And for the business, for the industry, mechanical account for 17%, and logistic like warehouse, because the location is low near the Ho Chi Minh City, a commercial hub. So more and more companies choosing the location to set up a warehouse here. And F&B account for 12% also. Material construction, consumer good, fashion, chemical, and so on. And here, I would like to introduce what inside an industrial park. Normally, they have the utility to support in the tenant. So here we have custom office. So owner of the tenant can do the custom clearance right on site. And we have the fire protection station. We have the water supply factory, and we have the water treatment here. And one more thing I would like to introduce is we have a dormitory built inside industrial park, supporting for 5,000 workers here. So when the as you know, when the COVID happened last 2-3 years, this dormitory helped us and our tenant a lot in terms of keeping the worker right on site of the factory to run the manufacturing. And we have support our tenant from the very first stage of research. We have a team to support our tenant to collect information and legal consulting or environmental or construction consulting. And when they decide to set up a business in our industrial park, we support them in terms of getting the license for investment certificate and enterprise registration certificate. We do it for free. And also we have a construction consultant and project management here because this is one of the important things for our tenant to know exactly how much is the cost they have to spending on the construction, and to follow the construction regulation correctly. And when they operate, we have a label recruitment service, and we do it for free for our customer. And also we have a legal team to update and support and consult when our tenant have an issue. And also we try to working with other industrial park and other organization to do some event to support our tenant to sourcing or to find a customer in Vietnam. So that's all of my part. I hope it gives you a general view of how an industrial park is running in here and how they support the tenant. And if you have any question, you can raise or you can ask in the Q&A section. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Very well done. And again, as Hugh mentioned, if anybody has any questions, feel free to send those in through the Q&A box. And a big thanks again to 𝗏𝗏 Corporation for sponsoring this webinar. They're definitely one of the premier industrial park developers and operators here in Vietnam. So last but not least, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dan On. Dan, if you're there, get you to start your video. Dan is the founder and CEO of Dan On Foods, or Dandy Pack Foods, established in Vietnam in 1999. It is a business group of Dandy Foods Group with the head office located in Richmond, British Columbia, in Canada, with factories in BC, Ontario, Thailand, Vietnam, California, and dealing in China, Hong Kong. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So good morning, everyone.
Hello.
I don't want to get you bored. Anyone who get bored. I don't have any statistics because I think we have listened enough statistics and opportunity. What I do in Vietnam is came in here in 1995, and we recognize this country dynamic, 65% young people, and population back then was like 80 million. Now is up to close to 100 millions, and there's not many industrial park back in the 1995. So they was starting up to build so-called industrial park. So nowadays, after 20 years, I think the entire Vietnam have more than 27 industrial park, more than the entire Canada, I believe. And look at the size of Canada and compare the size of Vietnam. I think British Columbia alone is bigger than Vietnam as part of the land. But actually, Vietnam has more industrial park, and this country has invited not only Korean company, Taiwan company, China company, but fortunately, because those countries come to Vietnam within like 2-hour flight. So people come here much easier than Canadian. So we have to fly across the Atlantic in the Pacific. It's 12 hours or 15 hours to come to Vietnam. So a lot of skepticism coming to Vietnam to invest. But for me, I don't care about that. So I'm an entrepreneur, and all I want to do is enterprise myself. So we came here in 1995, and we start with a small company. And now we have 4 or 5 factories in Vietnam, and we continue to expand the business. And for me, I want to assure Canadian business, you can be like me, come to Vietnam and set up your own manufacturer. And there's a huge opportunity. And the manufacturing sector is continuing to grow. And there is a huge labor force available in Vietnam compared to Canada, especially after COVID. I mean, my operation in Vancouver and Toronto, we are kind of devastating to find help. My operation in USA also, we encounter enormous labor shortage, and we're facing the huge inflation, and that's the downside having business in North America. And I'm lucky I have 3 or 4 factories in Vietnam, which will help me to balance our economy for my company. And we survived good through the pandemic, and actually we're the best run company in Vietnam because I foresee the future. When I build factory, I put in dormitory, I put in swimming pool, I put in jogging lanes, I put in a soccer field, because I know I have a team of 600 to 1,000 people working for me. So during the pandemic, we do a self-contained lockdown for 4.5 months, and we sustain. And I'm proving myself to my staff. I said, look, we are a little colony, so we can grow our own vegetable, and we have our own supply. Again, because we in the food supply chain, we are food manufacturers, so we have enough protein food to supply our own people. So we have no COVID case in our facility. So the government in Vietnam actually have to learn from me how to sustain and how to survive in the pandemic. So after that, we're really putting ourselves successful. Now with the next venture is after pandemic, we saw this necessary for us to move on plant-based beverage. Not to save the world, but we need to see the necessary to help sustain the entire population in Vietnam. If we're going to move to a non-dairy plant-based milk, and there's 100 million people here, they need to drink if in case of any crisis. And then we move on to plant-based biscuit. So if another pandemic or another crisis coming in, people cannot reach out for fresh food or fresh protein, then we have a plant-based protein will save lives. So for me, I do it because I don't want to tell people I'm save the world, but I feel like if I can do it, I will help this country and help to this economy and keep this country sustained. Vietnam is not a rich country. By reading all the statistics, people know all the opportunity. Yes, being a foreigner, you can run an enterprise. You'll be rich. Because you're taking the cheaper labor cost, so you can be very profitable. But after you make the profit, what will you do with it? So for me, I would like to pay back to the local community in Vietnam. So this is what I do. My company not only take care of workers in Vietnam, and we also run charity, and we feed thousands like Zach fundraising for the 2,000 COVID baby or COVID kids in Vietnam. And we also participate. We pick up 80 plus COVID baby. The infant, they're 2 years old, they up to 10 years old. And our company committed to help raising these kids. And we work closely with UBC in Canada. We have doctors coming to Vietnam to do a checkup for all these kids in Vietnam, and we have dentists coming from Canada to do teeth checkup for the kids and physical checkup. And we did a lot more, and that's why when I have a chance to go on the webinar today, I want to spread the message. You can come to Vietnam, do your visit, and also come to Vietnam, join us and do some community work. And we have many young Canadian folks, young teachers coming to Vietnam, part of the ILA, the in-law school, teaching English. And there's so much opportunity, and I cannot explain it all in like 20 minutes. So we would like to invite more business coming from Canada to Vietnam. And after this seminar, and I'm available to be in contact, I'm heading back to Vancouver tomorrow, and I will be speaking in front of maybe 500 and promote Vietnam. And also when I come back to Vietnam in early January, I will speak to another 500 business in Vietnam, and I will promote Canada. So I am the ambassador for both countries. Okay, so I'm available. You have 1,000 questions. I will try to answer to you within the next day or two. Okay, and I will have my email available on the screen and to share with everyone. Okay, thank you for your time. This is my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much, Dan. Again, a very, very successful Canadian business owner here. One of the best, if not the best, food processing companies in Vietnam, as well as a strong contributor to CSR and sustainable development here in the country. So with that, we conclude the presentation portion. So we'll move right into Q&A. I see a couple questions have come through. So again, if anybody's got them, just feel free to send them through the chat box or Q&A. We'll try to get to all of the questions. So the first one is to Mr. Hugh. It says, Long Hao, sorry, I just need to read this for a sec. Does Long Hao have high-rise rental factory available in Da Nang offered by Long Hao? Mr. Hugh, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about your Da Nang availabilities and sort of what's going on for manufacturing opportunities in that region.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hội from 𝐸𝐸 for the question. So far, we don't have high-rise factory in Da Nang, but we do have a small size one. Is under construction now and finished in the next month. With the size is nearly fit your 1,000. So we don't have high-rise, but we have small size standard factory over there. So you can contact for more consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question. I wonder, maybe this could go to Zachary or Hugh, maybe Dan as well, but just to talk quickly about logistics and port access in Vietnam and how that might compare to other markets, and if there's any significant differences in cost or shipping times when, say, sending something to North America.
So maybe I can take that one. I mean, when we talk about other markets, I guess you ask about China, but if we look at other ASEAN markets, it would be relatively the same. They are basically, in terms of price and transit time, there are not major difference between what you would get in China and what you would get in Vietnam or in ASEAN countries. That being said, there are, of course, less regularity. So in terms of number of shipments per day or per week, for instance, there are less from Vietnam rather than from China, from the major China ports. And in terms of time, basically, there are sometimes some stopover at other major ports for consolidation of the vessel, which could impact negatively when there are some blank sailing or when there are some basically some delay, and then you miss another vessel. So all in all, the logistic is rather a little bit more complex, a little bit more expensive, but nothing drastically impossible to manage. The other thing that is interesting, however, is usually we see a delayed impact on any changes. So for instance, when there was the big crisis on the availability of container in 2021, and then the price increase as well, it started in China, and then we saw the impact in Southeast Asia about 1 to 2 months later, which had so you can also anticipate a little bit more by seeing what is coming. One last thing maybe about Vietnam. As you know, Vietnam has the same, or maybe you don't know actually, but has the same Lunar New Year as China, so what we usually call Chinese New Year. So the dates are the same because it is lunar. However, in terms of industry, the impact is rather less long than what you get in China. So also the timing of shipment is less impacted around that time.
Perfect, thank you. Hugh, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
Actually, no.
Okay, perfect. So we have another question. This one's for Dan, asking for young entrepreneurs who want to leverage the bilateral relationship between Vietnam and Canada. What would your be advice on, how to look at that, or what types of ideas they should consider?
Well, come to our event. We're holding a monthly roundtable discussion in Vancouver. We'll talk about the bilateral trade between the two countries. Right now, the deficit is between Vietnam and Canada is so big. Canada allow imports Vietnamese goods. Last year is up to, like this year, going to be exceed $10 billion. Unfortunately, Vietnam business only import less than $1 billion Canadian goods and services. So we really need to encourage business in Vietnam to do more trade with Canadian people, Canadian business, and there is opportunity in many sectors, because Canada is not just selling natural resources. Many people misinterpret Canada, yes, because the country is big and it does have a lumber, mining industry, big, but the food sector is also big. Canadian wheat is the world number 2 or 3 supplier, and Canadian canola seed and agriculture product, Canada is leading in the top 10 the world supply, the food supply chain. So we want to let Vietnamese entrepreneurs understand what Canada can offer through our monthly seminar and roundtable discussion. And we have to bring the business people from the two countries closer through meeting, discussion, face-to-face, business matchmaking coming up. And we want business in Vietnam participate, but because we find Asian culture is shy to speak. So we want to invite more business from Vietnam come to Canada and come with us. Then we introduce you to Canadian business. Maybe we're going to bring a lot more Canadian people, Canadian business come to Vietnam next March. And we're now organizing an event, a team of Vietnamese entrepreneur and Vietnamese businessmen come to visit Canada in July. Why July? Because Canada month of June, July, August is beautiful. It's not cold. It's hot like Vietnam. So it's easy for the Vietnamese people travel to Canada. And also we will help them to apply the visa going to Canada, because it takes 4 to 5 months to process to getting a visa to visit Canada. Okay, so the opportunities are there, and write to me, and I will introduce you to different sector of business if you want to proceed to Canada. Okay.
That's great, Dan. Thank you. And we have a few people here who are asking your contact info in Canada. So if it's all right, I guess with everybody, we'll share just the emails for all three speakers here in a follow-up following the webinar. Okay, moving on. See a few others asking for contact info. So another just asking in general, is it easy to source product in Vietnam? Like if you're say a business in Canada looking to import from Vietnam, is it easy to find a supplier, or I guess are there any sort of key challenges or opportunities relating to that? So Zachary, maybe you want to take a shot at that one.
Yes, sure. Well, same. I will say it depends on what you call easy. The first approach is not that difficult. Basically, compared to about 10 years ago, most of the manufacturers in Vietnam have visibility either online or through federations, exhibitions. There are more and more exhibitions, but more importantly, there are more and more manufacturers attending those big exhibitions. So it's a good entrance. That being said, there is a little complexity into the Vietnamese manufacturing, where there are not too many hubs with like the same manufacturers in the same area. So you have that complexity of following through, meaning that even if you find them afterwards, to be able to qualify them, to actually assess whether or not they are potential for you, depending on the criteria as you set up, the size, the certifications, the capabilities, the quality, and so on. This is a bit more difficult to actually follow. So identifying them rather easy. Qualifying them, it's a challenge with people on the ground. One more aspect to consider is with what we explained, basically that shift of manufacturing in Southeast Asia and coming sometimes from foreign direct investment. Some factories, they are less easy to find because they are being managed by a headquarters somewhere else in the world. So there are many Chinese factories, many Chinese-owned factories relocating to Vietnam. Yet to find them, they are not visible anywhere, and the contacts remain in China when you want to do business. So that's something you need someone who actually knows their way around, sometimes using the industrial park knowledge where they are based, sometimes using simply people well connected and expert in sourcing. And at the end, it comes down to the same, which is to have the right big picture and then being able to select the potential ones, which is usually less numerous. One last aspect, I'm sure most of you know, but sometimes we face customers looking for an alternative out of China and expecting to find exactly the same. Remember, Vietnam is much smaller than China, so there are not as many manufacturers in one field as there are in China. Second thing is the culture, the business culture, in terms of how they reply, how they quote, the fast interaction, the way to present. This is completely different. So if you expect the same, you will be surprised badly. But you should again persevere and not, try to have an open mind in the finding. So yes, identifying easy, qualifying much more challenging, and I strongly suggest to get people expert from that area.
Perfect, thank you. And Hugh, we've got one for you. You'd mentioned earlier about the 500 square foot, I believe you said, factories, ready-built factories. So just a question here asking about, what it's like trying to find a factory to set up yourself in terms of looking at real estate. And maybe if you have any thoughts on, the different types of options that are available, or some considerations for a company that, might be looking at Vietnam for the first time to set up manufacturing operations.
Well, when a company is the first time come into searching for information and the chance to set up a manufacturing facility, so it's up to their industry, because first is the location. We are the only one. We have 1, 2, or 3 locations, but not everything. So the first thing is we should talk directly with them which area is suitable for their industry, because it's first they need to be close to their client or close to the material resource, or close to the supplier, or they need to be close for the major infrastructure facility like airport or the port. So this is the first one. We don't directly advise them about our location, but we consult them on where is suitable for them, and then we talk about the option to start. And as you know, the supply for industrial land inside a operating industrial park is more and more less. And of course the price to owning the land is going up. You see a reason for the last 3 years is going very fast. So it's harder and harder for manufacturing in terms of owning the land, and especially the land law in Vietnam. They changed almost every 10 years. So next year will be a new land law. So I think there are more regulation for developer to building up a project. So of course it's adding up cost for them. So the price gonna going up. So the ready-built factory is the good option for the manufacturer to start. And among, as I mentioned, Long Hậu Industrial Park is we are a group of the company owning a lot of industrial park, but Long Hậu Industrial Park, we focus on SME. So that's why for a long time ago, we already go with ready-built factory, and with a very small size, like 500 square meter. And now we also have a high-rise factory, which sometimes, you know, a 200 square meter can even start a manufacturing with a more reasonable price. Like for high-rise, because we use less land and we have more space, so we can rent a reasonable price for manufacturer to start. And setting up a manufacturing is not a simple thing. Many things occur. How to bring the machine in, how to recruit the manager, or how about the tax, or how about the report or something. So it takes time. If you build your own factory, it takes, if you doing well, it takes 1.5 years or normally 2 years to start. But if you start by ready-built factory, maybe 2-3 months, you can immediately start. So is it the difference?
Perfect. Thank you. So I guess, oh, sorry. Zach,
if I may add something on what you said. One thing we witness, we do a lot of what we call industrial mission, which is actually before the industrial companies getting in touch with the industrial park. We try to assess what you said, which is, okay, compared to the requirement from the customer, compared to what is their target, what are their criteria of choice, we try to support them in choosing the right location. So this is why it's very important to have a good vision on what is the achievement, what is the goal of where you want to set up. And the second thing, one thing that is quite interesting with the ready-built factory, we witnessed sometimes it doesn't work, it doesn't apply depending on the manufacturing process and so on. But aside from going fast, aside from allowing to start small and sometimes to be not as costly, there is also the investment cost. When you actually take a land and build a factory, you have a huge investment to put up front. When you actually move in a ready-built factory, you can do it with a monthly rental fee, which allows a much less investment. And same, actually the evolution in the next 5-10 years, we saw customers when they want to grow or if they want to actually exit, it's much simpler to do it if you have these kind of solutions. So it allows much more flexibility and agility. And given the current times with, of course, some crises that add up along the year, it's a huge advantage. So we saw some very successful story going through that direction.
Thank you. We had another interesting question come through here. It was sort of on automation and efficiency. And obviously there's been a lot of significant improvements and investments in manufacturing in Vietnam generally, in terms of bringing in robotics and automated production lines and things like that. So this question, it was asked to Dan, but I think it might be good to hear from all three of you on this about are there any key trends relating to factories that are making the significant capital investment to bring in more automated production lines, and what effect does that have on overall efficiency, production, and profitability?
Okay, well, this is a debate in countries like Vietnam and China, Cambodia, because people say, well, especially in the garment industry, employ like tens of thousands of people to make Adidas suits. We know it. It's in the VSIP 1 and VSIP 2. And in such a industry, you employ like 200,000 people. Look at LG, provide 10,000 jobs, and Samsung providing 50,000 jobs. But those are labor market. But for a Canadian business like me, I'm looking to a long-term social welfare, because I'm not those company. I'm born in Canada. I'm raised in Canada. I'm born in Vietnam, but I live in a country have different culture, and we like to see equal on everything, better life, quality service, and quality life and quality job. So I run my business, my enterprise differently than others. I went through this innovation and revolutionary. I follow the European Industrial 4.0, adapt to my labor environment, manufacture. I have changing from 5,000 workers to 1,000, from 1,000 to 600 now. I don't want to pay my workers a couple $100 a month if they make cashew, or they blow in plastic jar, or they're making paper canister in my production line. So I want to empower my Vietnamese workers, encourage them to make $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $5,000 a month. And how I'm going to do that? I have to give them an opportunity, a fair chance to learn, and reduce the labor skilled worker and make them become a professional operator. And I adopt automation from Germany and from Japan and from China into my food processing business. And it works. And now many people told me, oh, Dan, you did so wrong. You could make a lot more money by employing 5,000 people, because the labor, the wages in Vietnam is cheaper than me buying a robot. It is the debate, it is true. But I challenge my staff. They can only work 12 hours a day, 6 days or 7 days a week. But my robot, it can run 24 hours. And my robot, the arm doesn't get tired. And my robot doesn't have emotional. And my robot doesn't sleep. And that it gives us the efficiency in production. So I love robots, and I love my people. And now my people are very smart, because Vietnamese are young, dynamic, like I mentioned, and they're willing to learn. And as long as I continue bringing those master engineering from Germany, from Europe, come to Vietnam to teach the Vietnamese people. And there is a great chance for the industry in Vietnam. And I would like to invite more business come to visit our factory, because you will find amazing. Because people ask me why I put a musical fountain in a food manufacturing factory. Because I said, I don't have time, all my resources to fly 1,000 workers to Las Vegas to watch the Bellagio water fountain. Instead, I would build a fountain in my factory to entertain my workers. So instead of sending my workers go up to swimming pool, I build a swimming pool in my factory. So my workers, they can swim. And then my workers, Vietnamese love soccer. So I have a soccer field inside my factory. So, and then they can play soccer in my factory. I have the best restaurant in my factory, because I want everybody looking forward for that warm and hearty breakfast every morning. And when they work for 4 hours and they get starving, they want to eat their lunch, and they're looking forward to have that healthy lunch in our canteen. So I make all my workers have a very good spirit. This every day they're looking forward to work for the company. And then we organize field trip, let the workers go to Taiwan, go to Thailand, go to China on the annual vacation and see what is being outside of Vietnam, so they can compare life to life. So this is what I create in Vietnam, and I welcome all of business come to visit our factory in Bình Dương. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. I'm not seeing any more questions come through. We do have a couple minutes left, however. So Zachary, Hugh, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yes, maybe more on a general views on how Vietnam is doing into automation. Basically, Vietnam is following at a different pace and so on the trend that what we saw happen in China. So even though the labor force is cheaper, it is still, getting raised on a yearly basis. It's much more stable. There are not high peaks. The numbers of the inflation and the numbers of the increase on the salaries are not two numbers percentage. So it's relatively stable. Yet there is, of course, the acceleration with that shift of new industries into Vietnam. We were talking about electronic, automobile, and so on. It brings a trend of automation into factories. So that has an impact both, of course, on the type of workers, the quality of the workers that you are looking for, but also the fact that automation is being brought by the big major industries actually attracts its efficiency to smaller industrial, which are based in Vietnam. So it starts, but it's very early stages. It is actually a good potential market for manufacturers who are specialized into robotics, because there is a demand. We actually support a French company bringing automotive arms for plastic industry, and we support them into finding customers and dealing with new potential contacts. But it's not automatic. There are not many factories using automation so far, and as Dan was saying, right now the efficiency compared to the labor force is yet to be proven. But looking in the next 5-10 years, definitely it's going to accelerate and it's going to be present.
Thank you. Hugh, any final thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I would like to add on that automation will happen. Even some of Vietnam manufacturers right now, they recognize after the pandemic, the more people you have, the more problem you have. So they understand that and they try. Because for industrial park also, when you first setting up an industrial park, so maybe a lot of labor force, but more and more business come, so labor shortage will happen. So in terms of the owner of the factory, they will try to do automation. But the problem is the quality of the staff or the worker there, the education, and that's it. So this is the balance, and each industry have a different situation, and they have to choose.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all, Hugh, Dan, Zachary, for your presentations and your time here today. That's a big topic and lots of insights and information to consider. I definitely, again, want to thank 𝗏𝗏 Corporation for sponsoring this webinar. As mentioned, we'll send a follow-up with the contact info for all the speakers as well as the presentations. If anyone watching has any additional questions or thoughts or ideas, just let us know. So next year we'll be rolling out more sector-specific events like this. So be sure to follow 𝐶𝐚𝐬 through our newsletter, LinkedIn, Facebook page, etc. And if you have any ideas for topics, just let us know. So hope to see you all again soon. Enjoy your day or your evening, depending which side of the ocean you're on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay. Bye. Aloha.